Taylor Decker's on my All-22 fantasy team.
Stop. They don't care.
So the strategic component to this game is through the roof.
Your predictions, right? Your forecasting in fantasy football into how good is this player?
This is it's gonna change the industry.
Yeah, I moved to the old town where it goes down. Look at me now. I wrote my goals down. I hold it down. Made myself proud.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another All-22 podcast. You got Chris and Ray. Ray, I'm worked up today. I feel like I'm in a bad mood, not sleeping great. People are being jerks in fantasy leagues. People that I love, though. People that I love. I'll give him that. I love the guy. But it's been a crazy week for me. How are you?
You can't let this get to you, man. You're 5 weeks in, 18 years. You got 18 years, Chris. You gotta keep it together. You're just getting started.
I like my sleep. I'm
yeah,
not
it
great.
Ain't happening. It ain't happening. Get some sunlight. You get what is it, the outside privileges or whatever. Take advantage while you can.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually like a warm day here. By warm, it's like in the high 40s. So
yeah, it's like blisteringly hot. It's nice.
Yeah, might go put up the Christmas decorations outside later on. Take advantage of this, balmy 40-degree weather.
Dad things, man. Dad things.
Speaking of dads, I actually don't know if he's a dad. Is he a dad? I don't know, but Aaron Rodgers is like dad age, right? Okay, no, he's like he's like old enough to be like a dad to like probably Jordan Love or something.
Aaron Rodgers is like Derek Jeter if Derek Jeter had a very strange dating record. You know how like Jeter dated like his list of
it's not strange. It's phenomenal.
Rodgers is weird. Like he dates like Danica Patrick, and like not that she's not cute, she's great. She's great. It's just like he's dating Jessica Alba. He's dating a NASCAR driver. I'm just saying, just putting that out there.
Oh, okay. Shot at NASCAR. I'm gonna tell my wife not to listen to this episode. Sure. But dad aged Aaron Rodgers is I mean, it's called father time. And one of the biggest things about father time, aside from the fact that you get slower, you're not as quick, you get injured more often, but you also don't recover very quickly, right? You recover much slower than you did when you were in your 20s. And apparently Aaron Rodgers, after suffering a torn Achilles, was it a ruptured Achilles? Is there a difference? I don't know. Is back at practice. That's a little and does it even matter? Is there a point to it given where the Jets are and how things have just unraveled? You're the Rodgers guy. I'm just going to let you just run with it, blank canvas. But Aaron Rodgers is on the practice field.
I didn't want to talk about Aaron Rodgers today. I'll be honest, because like I'm already in a bad mood. Why am I going to talk about something that's going to put me?
That's why I want to talk about it.
But Aaron Rodgers coming back to practice to a team that is now basically out of the playoff picture. I'm pretty sure they are, but like I'm sure there's some weird odd where they could get in. Just tells me one thing, that he's doing this so that the coaches keep their jobs. And should the coaches keep their jobs? Like that's at the end of the day, that's really the point of this, right? Is like, is there a chance Nathaniel Hackett is the worst offensive coach ever in the existence of the NFL to get a head coaching job? The only reason he got a head coaching job is because of Aaron Rodgers. He gets fired a year after it, gets ridiculed for being the worst coach in history by his predecessor. And then he goes to the Jets, and without Rodgers, it has looked like the worst offense in the history of football. And now Rodgers is going to come back to try to keep this guy from getting fired. And to me, that's all this is about, is Rodgers kind of doing his guy a solid, saying, I'm going to try to help Hackett keep his job as OC. We're going to run this back next year, and hopefully things get better. But from my point of view, it's like, why do you want to keep an offensive coordinator that has now, I think, consistently proven that he's not adding any value to what you're doing? So why not get somebody better for you next year? I get it. Rodgers is trying to be a nice guy, but like, to me, this is kind of like, it's just a weird storyline. It's something that like, I think if Rodgers gets hurt in these two games, this is going to blow up, right? Like if Rodgers comes back and gets injured again, this is a really bad thing for the NFL and for the New York Jets.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we talk about how like quarterbacks or great quarterbacks are the like ultimate, I call them deodorant, right? You have a lot of issues. You have a great quarterback. It just masks so much of that other stuff, right? The interesting thing with Aaron Rodgers is he brings about a lot of the issues into the organization. And Theo Ash actually had a great video about this about a week or so ago, about how every move that the Jets made to bring Aaron Rodgers on board and make him comfortable has just been a disaster. Whether it's the Lazard contract, I mean, Randall Cobb, Nathaniel Hackett, it's several more. The list just sort of goes on, right? Everything was made to kind of appease and placate Rodgers and get him into the front door in the first place. And then obviously, unfortunate circumstances, then he just 4 plays into the season is not there or on the field. And now you're stuck with all of these just aging bad players and a coach that is not seen at all as like you said, a value add offensive coordinator, play caller, game planner, what have you. And it's just a bad dynamic when you have a defensive head coach who is holding up his end of the bargain. If you're going to keep it very simple, right? Defensive head coach, the defense is outstanding. That unit is phenomenal. They're playing very well. And then the offense is a mess. And each of those individual transactions you kind of knew weren't necessarily anything worthwhile. But if they got you Aaron Rodgers, well, then that would make the offense, make up for it, right? Aaron Rodgers would make up for that all on his own and kind of drag that offense into competency. With that defense, then you have a chance. So a lot of the problems that have to be deodorized are a result of Aaron Rodgers. So what do you do with that? At this point, I don't think he's going to retire. So do you piss him off? Do you not bring back Hackett after what you've seen so far? Do you run it back with a happy Aaron Rodgers in year 2, assuming that he's going to be healthy in 2024 and he has more time away from the Achilles injury and just see what happens? I would not want to fire the head coach. That's just me. I know a lot of Jets fans may feel differently. But we know what Saleh is on the defensive side, and he's held up his end of the bargain. They tried to do something on offense. They had a plan, and that plan got derailed because of injury. And so whether you want to tinker with that or make adjustments as it relates to the offensive coordinator and some of the personnel decisions, Randall Cobb should not be back next year, period. And just that's just an example. Plenty more moves like that. Then sure, fine. But I don't think you blow it up and get rid of the head coach in this situation because, again, he lost his starting quarterback and that basically the offense was built, and all offenses essentially are, but especially this one was all centered around Rodgers and he's not there. So yeah, I don't want to make a change at head coach if I'm the New York Jets.
So I might just be in a bad mood and wake up tomorrow and be like, have a completely different take on this. And I agree with what you said about Saleh. It's just really Hackett. And, I think there's probably like $50 million worth of reasons why Rodgers would stay if Hackett got fired. But we're going to be talking today about kind of like what we would do as the GMs of certain teams, right? We're going to start a series. It's going to be a cool little thing. And one of the things is, does a team have foundational pieces? So like what we're saying about the plan being derailed, like the Jets still had the 2nd overall pick quarterback playing for them with a true number 1 receiver. The offensive line's not great by any means. It's not the worst in the NFL either though, right? And they have a good running game. Like they have pieces on that offense where it shouldn't be like the worst in the NFL, and it's been the worst in the NFL, right? So it's like, it's kind of that discussion that I'm kind of saying, why are we keeping the OC around? And let's talk about things like that today, right? Like I want to talk about that. So let's actually transition, and this will be a good transition. So like I said, today we're going to be kind of talking about what we would do as GMs. We at All-22 pride ourselves on being able to be true GMs, right? That's what this game is your ability to be the GM of a team and lead a team better than what maybe like your favorite NFL team does, right? So we're going to try to do that today. We want to kind of back up our talk, right? Like, can we really do it better? What would our plan be? Is it realistic, right? We'll try to be as realistic as possible. And today I want to start with like the Panthers and the Bears. So like the first thing, Ray, that I want to talk about with this kind of exercise is what things do you identify as needing to keep in mind as the GM of a team, right? So is it just coaching? Is it coaching player salaries? Is it veteran contracts? Is it draft capital? Like what things are you considering when you're doing an exercise like this?
I always like to start off with there's 2 things, right? First is, what is your plan? Do you have a plan and a system in place? Or are you in search of a system because you have totally cleaned house and you're being sold on, by whoever kind of walks through the door as GM or head coach, as to their plan to get your roster into contention. That's number one. Number two is, assuming you have a plan in place, what is your biggest investment? Most times that's going to be the quarterback. How are you protecting your biggest investment, right? What is the strength of your team, your roster? How are you built, and how are you protecting or enhancing or optimizing your strengths? So as we get into these individual exercises and talk deeper into that, we'll see how that kind of drives every move that you make with that in mind, because it's very hard to fix everything all in one offseason. It's just the NFL is not built that way, right? There are systems in place and checks and balances to prevent that, basically, right? And that's kind of what gives us parity for the most part in the NFL. So what is your plan, knowing that you can't eat the whole elephant? You got to take bites. What is it to take chunks out of the elephant, whatever the heck that stupid saying is? Eat the elephant in chunks. There you go. What chunks are you eating? Are you eating the leg first? Are you eating are you going straight for the breast meat? I don't know. But that sort of drives your entire plan based off of A, what plan or system you have in place, and then B, what is your prize investment, your franchise investment, and how are you optimizing that? Because I've always been a believer, we've talked about this, when it comes to roster construction, or even something as simple as a lot of people like to shuffle different parts along the offensive line, right? When they're quote unquote versatile. I like to focus on who are my best players and how do I get my best players to play at their best, right? So if you're a 9 out of 10 offensive guard and you might be a 6.5 or a 7 offensive tackle, just because offensive tackle is more important doesn't mean I'm sliding you over to offensive tackle, right? I've been preaching this, and it seems like this is how it ended up in Dallas, right? But when you look at the Cowboys, you know me, I've been saying this since day one. I want Tyler Smith at guard. I know he can play tackle. I know he can play tackle pretty well, but that guy is a certified stud at guard. That's everything you're looking for on the inside. And for a long time, it looked like they were going to really try to force him at tackle. He's been now at guard all season, and you've seen the results of him on the inside. He's one of the top players in the league at this point, and that offensive line has started to really stabilize itself, mostly because of a healthy Tyron Smith on the outside, but because you have someone playing so well on the inside like Tyler Smith alongside those other pieces. You have your best players playing at their best positions. So to bring that all back around, right, what is your biggest investment, your most important piece, right, or pieces, and how are you optimizing them? And that drives everything else from there.
Okay, so let's start with the Bears, who technically have the first pick. What would be the first thing that you would do if you're the GM of the Bears this offseason?
Yeah, this is a fun one. If I'm the GM of the Bears, I'm so excited for this offseason. I can't wait for these games to end, basically, right? First thing I'm doing is I am working the phones. I am putting Justin Fields on the trade block, and I am seeing what I can get from Justin Fields. It didn't work out. It's not working out. He has flash plays. He has highlight plays. Every game there is a highlight or two from Fields, but it's not consistent down to down. He just hasn't really evolved consistently down to down into what you need from a franchise quarterback to win at the highest level in this league. If someone wants to disagree, I'd love to hear it, but we just haven't seen it. It's just not working out. The good news is, as the Bears, you basically got a mulligan by fleecing the Panthers in last year's trade when they moved up to go get Bryce Young. So now you have ammunition to work with to solve your quarterback position and then build your team around him from there. But first thing I'm doing is I am shopping Justin Fields.
Okay, I like that. I think if I'm the GM of the Bears, I'm looking at the complete roster, right? The first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at the complete roster. I'm saying, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? And one thing at All-22, right, that we have the positional weights, right? So we are saying that there are certain positions that are more valuable than the others, quarterback being the most valuable. So I think it's correct for you to first look at quarterback and say, am I set at quarterback? I am somebody that's still kind of in the middle, saying the Bears could probably go either way and be fine. Like Justin Fields, in my perspective, is a good enough football player that I think if you gave him time, you set the roster up well, he can be successful. I look at the roster and I say, okay, so if I'm unsure at quarterback, let's take it to the next level. Let's look at offensive line. We've invested in tackles. We have Braxton Jones. We have Darnell Wright. We feel comfortable with that. I don't really like Darnell Wright, but like the team does. I look at the receivers. We went and got DJ Moore. I don't know if the depth is there at receiver that you would want, right? So like DJ Moore's great. He's been excellent for them, but is there the depth at receiver that you would want? Then you look at defense, right? Do I have an edge rusher? They got Montez Sweat. I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't really think there's depth at edge rusher either. You probably need another one. So receiver, you need another one. Edge rusher, you need another one. They have the cornerbacks down, but I think Jalen Johnson is actually a free agent. So that's got to be a big priority, bringing him back. If not, that's somebody you have to replace. Safety, we're probably good, but those are, and defensive interior, you don't really have much there either, right? Like that's kind of just mediocrity throughout. You spent a decent second round pick, I think last year on a defensive interior, but it hasn't really paid dividends yet. You need to get a stud there. So I'm looking at my roster and I'm saying, it's pretty incomplete. Like it's not where I think it needs to be, where if I just drop a quarterback in there, it's a surefire thing that it's going to be successful. But to your point, this is a very exciting offseason for the Bears because they have a lot of draft capital. So you're saying I'm shopping Justin Fields. What do you think you can realistically get for Justin Fields?
So in sleuthing around the interwebs, right? This will not be the full compensation package. Obviously, right? There will be additional picks and probably some conditions in place as a result of future playing time and such. But for the purposes of this exercise, the crux of the deal and the main piece is going to be sending Justin Fields to the Las Vegas Raiders for pick number 43 in the second round. There's going to be additional picks, but I don't believe Justin Fields will fetch a first round pick on his own. I think it's a 2+, and that's a pretty decent 2, and then starting point from there. So
what did Trey Lance just get traded for?
A fourth.
So like,
yeah,
Justin Fields is definitely better. You know, he has game experience. He showed highs. But do we think that Justin Fields is definitely going to get a second when all the other teams in the league know that you're replacing him with whoever you drafted number 1?
I think so, because I think he'll have more than one suitor.
Okay. So we're getting a second round pick.
Second round pick and others, but we're just going to worry about the second round pick for now.
Okay.
If someone's screaming, "Oh my gosh, he's Justin Fields," okay, then you call somebody and try to get a first round pick. Go through the teams. I don't think people are going to give up a first round pick for a quarterback who to date has shown flashes but is not winning any games. Will have to come into a new system, and then is going to have to get paid over the next 2 years into a large contract if he's your guy of the future. So any event, yes, second round pick for Justin Fields, 43rd overall. So now that gives us, as it's currently projected, right, as we sit here on Thursday, November 30th, we then have picks 1, 4, 43, and then 65 at the top of the third round. So 4 picks to work with in the first 2 days. With that, again, I just traded Justin Fields. We just had our episode last week. I'm taking Caleb Williams as my number one pick, and he's my franchise quarterback. And going from there, so this was using the PFF mock simulator like 12 times. Every single time this worked out, no variance. I got Caleb Williams at 1, and then I got tackle Olu Fashanu at 4 with my second first round pick to, again, be a franchise tackle in front of him. And then you really start to shore up your offensive line. We talked about it before. I know some people kind of like him at right tackle. I think he's fine there, but I do think he can profile well inside. And so that, of course, is Darnell Wright. So you could have an offensive line where you have Fashanu and Braxton Jones at tackle, Tevin Jenkins and Darnell Wright at guard. We'll get into our free agency moves, I'm assuming, a little bit later on here. But those are 4 young, very good pieces to have on the offensive line. So after your first 2 picks in the first round, you have now your franchise quarterback. You have a pretty solid offensive line in front of him. and we still have DJ Moore on the outside. So we're starting to really put the pieces of the puzzle together on offense. So I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, let's pause there for a second. Talk about, so you're going and getting your franchise quarterback. Your head coach is Matt Eberflus, who is defensive minded, right? And he's in his second season, and they currently have like the 5th worst defense in the NFL, according to PFF. So are you keeping the head coach?
I'm not keen on keeping him, to be totally honest. I'm not a huge fan of Eberflus and kind of what's been done there already. And I'm not sure how deep we want to go into this. Like, okay, well then who is my head coach? I don't know. Over the last 24 hours or so, there's, you have the whispers of, oh, well, Jim Harbaugh might be looked at by the Bears this coming off season. I'm not going to get that deep. And even if so, I actually don't think Jim Harbaugh's the guy. I don't think Jim Harbaugh and Caleb Williams stylistically work with each other. I think Caleb Williams is more of a downfield, aggressive type passing attack. Jim Harbaugh likes to do a lot of, downhill running and play action and that sort of thing. And that kind of limits what makes Caleb Williams great. And I don't want to hear about what he did with Kaepernick and the spread, whatever it was almost 10 years ago now to this point. The NFL has caught up to that. And lately, the last 7+ years, 8 years of Jim Harbaugh, when you've seen him on the field, it's a downhill sort of physical brand, which is great. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying, as it relates to Caleb Williams, that limits what makes Caleb Williams great. So I don't think it's a great fit. If you look at someone like Jim Harbaugh as head coach, if you say, I'm not keen on Eberflus, I'm investing on a franchise quarterback, so I want an offensive head coach, all that is great. I just don't think Harbaugh is that exact coach. But to me, I'm not keen on Eberflus. I would look to an offensive-minded head coach because, again, that's going to be our greatest investment. We have to protect that because there are some people out there who may still believe in Justin Fields, or even if they don't, they were fans of Fields coming out, knowing that he needs some work. And just a lot of the environment around him was not great. And we've seen how he just has not been able to really grow and develop in that, in that organization for the last 3 years. So I think it is paramount to be as quarterback friendly as possible with everything we do. And that starts with the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement on that. I think I change coaches. I definitely think I do that. I want somebody that's going to be a great role model mold for Caleb Williams. I love with what like the Colts did this year and their hire. I love, the Texans bringing in PFF Bobby to be their OC, right? Like it's kind of those moves that have kind of helped these quarterbacks be successful and just those teams be successful. I think if you have a coach that's defensive minded and after 2 years, you're still the 5th worst defense in the NFL, I'm moving on. Like it's not even a question. I think the number 1 pick, if you go quarterback and you're replacing Justin Fields, fine. Let's say that's what we're doing. Great. We get the 2nd round pick. The 2nd pick going offensive line. You have invested heavily in the offensive line already. You have Nate Davis at guard as well, I believe. So you adding another offensive lineman, I get it. I think it makes sense because of the draft that we have, right? It's the offensive line is a strength. The tackle class is great, and you're getting a blue chip offensive lineman. I think if it was any other draft where we have a blue chip defensive player, I think we have to go defense. I think we have to go edge rusher or defensive interior, but I don't think there's strength at those positions. So I'm fine. Yes, I agree. Let's go offensive tackle. So we go quarterback, we go offensive tackle. Justin Fields is now a Raider. What's your next move here?
Poor Justin. Poor Justin. He's over there in Vegas. Who knows what, I guess he'll be getting yelled at by Antonio Pierce. So got our quarterback, got our offensive tackle. Fast forwarding a bit, and just to be clear for some context, in case you were wondering, you may have figured it out by now, but Marvin Harrison Jr. was taken between picks 1 and 4. He was gone to Arizona in this draft simulation. So even if you wanted to pair kind of that 1-2 punch at receiver with someone like Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. Was off the board to Arizona in this mock. So with that, if you fast forward to pick 33, I am going wide receiver. A lot of it, not a lot of it, but a part of it is also how the board falls. There's not a lot of great defensive players, defensive linemen left on the board at this point. at least as a, relative to that pick anyway. So I took Troy Franklin, the receiver from Oregon, at pick 43. Get Justin Fields, get Caleb Williams, another young prototype wide receiver, height, weight, speed guy who can make plays downfield. Kind of complements the style of DJ Moore as well. And the other thing to keep in mind there is just money and payment. I mean, Darnell Mooney was a free agent, or is going to be a free agent this coming off season. I would not sign him to a second contract. I'm not a big fan of signing someone like that to a second deal. So now you really have a hole opposite DJ Moore, and I think you shore that up with someone like Troy Franklin, a wide receiver from Oregon. And then at pick 68, to fast forward and kind of wrap up the draft, we're only going to do the first 3 rounds of this draft. A 4th round pick shouldn't really make a huge difference in the immediate future. So pick 68, I take someone like defensive tackle Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, or McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M. Once again, the edge board didn't really fall great here. And like you mentioned, you need more on the defensive line. I like Gervon Dexter a lot, but there really is not much else there as far as upside is concerned. So we're gonna shore up the defensive line here too. Finally, get defense on the board with our draft picks. So you'll see the focal point here is offense, but can't just completely neglect the defense in this instance.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the first point that we kind of disagree on. I get that receiver is a huge strength in this draft, but it is also a huge strength in the free agency class. And I like some of the free agents for a rookie quarterback, right? Like, you don't want to go get a Mike Evans and rely on him as the only guy that you add just because of the age. He might only be there for a year or two, similar to what's like Adam Thielen's doing for Young in Carolina. But Mike Evans is a leader and he knows what he's doing and can really help out a locker room like that. So you look at DJ Moore and Mike Evans as your outside receivers, and then maybe you draft somebody a little later in the draft. I like that a lot more. There's also like T. Higgins, if you could get a guy like T. Higgins and bring him in. But, if we're going to talk about just the draft right now, I would say, I would have to look at defense and try to find a defensive playmaker to help out my team. So let's say that like one of these edge rushers, right? There's a few guys, pick the one that you will, but the kid from Ohio State is typically available, I believe. So like, I think I probably try to go that way. Like, let's go get an edge rusher. Let's go get the best corner on the board. Let's do something like that, because if we don't, I think that defense is going to just start looking weaker and weaker. Yes, I know what you always say. Like, you got to just keep going to your strength, build your strength, right? You're going to get Caleb Williams. You're building the offensive line, get him the receivers he needs. I just think you can do that other ways this year. I think you have to go defense at some point early in this draft so that you're not the worst defense in the NFL and that all the pressure is on your offense game in and game out. Like, kind of like the Lions last year. Like, you're putting up 35 points a game. Your defense is giving up 40, right? And it's like, yes, in a couple of years, maybe you can fix that. But I think there are good players that you can go get that, again, would make a difference for your team. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, we tried to sign T. Higgins. He didn't. He turned us down. So we had to go the draft route. So
gotcha.
We tried. We would try for a T. Higgins for sure. That'd be great. If we could get T. Higgins here and then maybe get the corner out of Georgia at the top of the second round or something, that's phenomenal. Because then we wouldn't need a receiver, but didn't fall that way. And I wasn't going to fall back on giving Darnell Mooney some money. I'm not giving him a second contract. Evans, yeah, cool. I don't know. It didn't tickle my fancy. I like Franklin a lot. I really do. So, and I do think, yes, it's true. The defense as a whole needs to be better and is a ways away. But I do like maybe like is a bit of a strong word, but I'm not terribly concerned, assuming they re-sign Jalen Johnson, which we did in this exercise of the cornerback room here that we have with Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, and Terrell Smith. It's not the greatest trio, but it's not the worst trio either.
If you can bring Jalen Johnson back.
Yeah. We couldn't get T. Higgins, so we gave Jalen Johnson another $1.5 million or so per year, and we got him across the finish line. So
love that.
He's with us. So it's not the worst corner trio there. Again, not the best, but it's enough to where you can go out and play on Sunday, and it's not a glaring hole. So That's just kind of how our board fell. But we live in a simulation, and your world could be different. So
of course, yeah, I'm going JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State in the second round with that pick. So essentially trading Justin Fields for that JT Tuimoloau at edge, and you have Montez Sweat and Tuimoloau, and that's starting to look a little bit better, right? Take a little pressure off those corners, and those corners are actually playing well this year. So you start to think if you can start getting pressure on the quarterback, they're going to look that much better. Starting to add a little bit of balance. So I like to do that. I'm cool with going 2 picks, offense first round, but then second round, I'm probably going defense. Okay, what's the next thing you're doing for the Bears?
Well, chronologically, this doesn't make sense because free agency comes first, right? But our other free agent signing was Aaron Brewer at center. Just to, again, the spine of that offense, you want an experienced center, someone who's been there before. If you have a young quarterback to kind of settle things down, the rest of the pieces on this offensive line are all young players, right? Very talented, but they're all young with Fashanu Jenkins, Wright, and Braxton Jones. So you get someone like Aaron Brewer in there, a vet, to really solidify things on that line, make the calls, give you that veteran presence that really calms down that whole offense, which at this point now is very young, and really stabilizes that whole unit. And so that is our sort of key offensive free agency pickup that just makes things more friendly for our young Caleb Williams at quarterback. And we build out from there because now we're looking at Caleb Williams, a strong offensive line led by a veteran center, 2 receivers on the outside led by DJ Moore. You have a strong running game. We're kind of cooking with some gas here, right? Cole Kmet at tight end, perfectly fine. Somehow he's still only 25 years old. I feel like he's been in the league for 7 years. So that's another sort of big, tight end target there. So I'm okay with where we are on offense, and I'm comfortable giving a young quarterback playing time in this unit. So again, that wasn't the chronologically next thing we did, but that's what we sort of did to put the cherry on top on offense. I'll stop if you want before I go into the defense.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm kind of on the same page as you. I think, we went and tried to get T. Higgins. He said no. We went after Mike Evans. Maybe he said no too. He ends up staying in Tampa. He wants to retire there. He likes the beach too much. So I go and I sign
at the Bay. So yeah, there's beaches here, right?
Yeah, I get it, technically. I go and sign like Van Jefferson, right? I go for guys that are these like 3rd tier receivers. Maybe I sign a couple of them, right? Like you were going to pay T. Higgins big money. You decide to put that money elsewhere, but you bring in a Van Jefferson and, another guy, maybe like a Scotty Miller, right? You're going for like route runners. You just want guys that are getting open. Maybe you want a playmaker. You go for a guy like Laviska Shenault, right? Just to kind of, you could get him for like league minimum almost, just throwing kind of like your hat in the ring, trying to get some playmakers on the field for your quarterback. I think there's a lot of bigger name receivers like a Michael Pittman. We said T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley's there, Marquise Brown's there. It's a really good class. So there is a good chance that if you are willing to spend a little bit of money, that you can get a legitimate receiver to go with DJ Moore. But since you did DJ Moore last year, you're a little bit more conservative. You don't throw the bank at one of these guys. So you get some of those 2nd tier receivers. So for now, let's just say I get Van Jefferson, and then in the 3rd or 4th round, I'm drafting a receiver. But that's all I'm doing on offense as well. You went after the center. I think I've invested a lot in the offensive line at this point. We have 2 first-round picks at tackle. One is we're moving to guard. You have Nate Davis, who you signed for big money last year. So I'm not spending the money on center. Maybe there's, a guy like last year in the draft, there were plenty of centers available pretty late on the draft that are now playing. I know the Colts got a guy. There's plenty of guys that you can get later on in drafts at the center position. So that's what I'm doing. But let's go to the defensive side of the ball. I think I'm going to start this one off. I think the biggest need from my viewpoint, right? I talked about edge. I want to get edge in the 2nd round of the draft, so I'm not going to sign one of these guys, but there are plenty of them to sign. I'm going to go with a guy like Leonard Williams. If I'm going to throw my money at somebody, he's a little bit older. I get that, but he's one of those veteran guys that can be a leader to your defense. And I think the interior of your defensive line is a huge, huge need. Yes, they drafted a couple guys. We feel good about them, but it needs to be a rotation. You need to get guys in and out of there, and you need depth at the defensive interior position. I want my defensive line to be my strength. This is Chicago we're talking about here, right? It's brats and hot dogs. We need the big guys. And I think we need Leonard Williams to come in and just be a difference maker for that defensive line.
So you drafted JT Tuimoloau You have Montez Sweat at one at the other edge spot. Then you have Leonard Williams.
Leonard Williams is going to put his hand on the ground. I'm having Leonard Williams put his hand on the ground.
Yeah. So he's your one interior, and then your second interior is Gervon Dexter, right? The second round pick from last year.
Yep.
That's a lot of beef.
It's Chicago. We're talking about Chicago.
Yes. What I do think is missing a little bit is that one and I don't have this either, is that one screaming like around the corner bendy edge rusher, like weak side guy. It's just not there. And that's just kind of the way it fell, right? So in my exercise, we did not sign Leonard Williams. I actually don't mind that at all. I like that quite a bit. We just re-signed Yannick Ngakoue, not because we love him or anything, but because he can be had at one of those, 1 year, $3.5 million deals or whatever. That he's just that's just what he is these days. He provides some sacks and some splashes, but not much else. But again, it's a pulse and a body over there at the other edge spot that can give you something in the pass rush. And for some more context, the Bears are currently projected to have about $63 million in cap space for 2024.
So they can make some moves.
So they can make some moves. And actually in my exercise too, what we did is, who did we cut here? Did we cut Cody Whitehair and Eddie Jackson? Cut Eddie Jackson too. We saved about $23 million in cap space by making a couple cuts there too on some older veteran players. So we need a safety, and that's us. And I'm going to get to that next here too, is that what we did is we signed Jordan Whitehead from the Jets at safety in free agency to be opposite Jaquan Brisker. And my terms on that were 4 years, $28 million. So he was not cheap, but we can afford it. We have a quarterback on a rookie deal. We have cap space to work with. And, we're building a competent defense, right? It's not going to light the world on fire, but we're not going to be the worst defense in the league. So that's my other sort of free agency move to really kind of put a cap on this thing, is take care of the final level of the defense, sign Jordan Whitehead to go along with Jaquan Brisker, because we did cut Eddie Jackson, and good riddance. He killed my melon heads for a few years here before I finally cut the cord.
Okay. So you talked about screaming edge rushers, right? And I don't know if there's really one of those to that level, right? There's no Nolan Smith available right now, but there are guys like Brian Burns and Jordan Phillips available. Burns probably wants to get the hell out of Carolina. I don't know if that changes with a different coaching hire, but just a losing environment there. They don't have picks. We're going to talk about them next. But what about getting a guy like Brian Burns? And if you don't want to spend the money on Burns, you look at Jordan Phillips. A couple guys. But anyway, what do you think about Burns?
Juice was not worth the squeeze with Burns. And when we talk about the Panthers, if this is like a multiverse, but this is my universe, Panthers did a tag and trade. So we were out of the picture as the Bears. We didn't want to give up assets for another rusher when we already gave up a pick for Montez Sweat before signing him to a big deal. So that's a part of it too, is that the price we paid for Sweat, we're going to give another big contract to another rusher. Their skill sets actually complement each other pretty well. But even till now, Brian Burns has not been as consistent as we were all hoping for him to be. So while it's enticing, we're not trying to become a Super Bowl contender in a year, because it's just unrealistic. So we are going to hold firm a little bit there. But yeah, we considered it. So, but that was ultimately the verdict we reached. So if you want, I can wrap it up real quick then, just so everyone can kind of see where my simulation ended up with the Bears, what we did, and went from there, right? So to sum it all up, we traded Justin Fields to the Raiders for pick 43 and some change. We went ahead, drafted Caleb Williams. We then drafted Olufashinu, kicked Darnell Wright inside, and signed Aaron Brewer at center in free agency. So we like all five of our offensive linemen. I know you're a Nate Davis guy, Chris, but he wasn't doing it for me. So we're just cutting bait, sunk cost at this point. And then we went out and drafted Troy Franklin out of Oregon in the top of the second round. So our offensive line, we just mentioned, we have Caleb Williams at quarterback, and then receiver DJ Moore, Troy Franklin with Cole Kmet at tight end. And then on the defensive end, we signed Jordan Whitehead. We went ahead and cut Eddie Jackson. And just from sort of back to front or front to back. Our defensive line is Yannick Ngakoue. We brought him back. Andrew Billings, Gervon Dexter, Montez Sweat. Linebackers we didn't talk much about. I know linebacker is kind of a bit of a crapshoot, but TJ Edwards, very well there. Tremaine Edmonds, not really. We kind of called this not playing as well as he did last year, and that was kind of to be expected. Jack Sanborn, again, not the greatest unit, but it's somewhat functional. Jalen Johnson, we brought back Terrell Smith and Tyreek Stevenson at corner, and then again, Brisker and Whitehead at safety. So our foundational pieces on offense are essentially our entire offensive line: Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Troy Franklin. On defense, Gervon Sweat, Jaquan Brisker, Jalen Johnson. And did I mention Gervon Dexter? I think I did. So There you go. Those are my 4. So not the greatest. We're probably not going to the Super Bowl, but we have some pieces around our young quarterback that allow him to grow and develop into the playmaker that we believe he can become as a franchise guy. And defense kind of holds serve until we can really address that side of the ball with the rookie quarterback salary advantage that we're going to have in the coming years as we allow him to develop. So that's my plan for the Bears. Have at it.
Then it's a good plan. I think so. Again, the only difference is that we're having here, I agreed with your first round picks. I'm taking the edge rusher from Ohio State, JT Tuimoloau, early second round. So I'm building that defensive front with him. I'm adding Leonard Williams. We got the rookie from last year, Gervon Dexter. We have Montez Sweat now, right? So that defensive front is beefy, and it's going to be a strength, right? We want to build that as our strength. Bringing back Jalen Johnson. I'm going to keep Eddie Jackson because he's been there a long time. He's a locker room presence. I want to keep him around just to be a captain of this team. And then receiver, right? I said I'm going to go add Van Jefferson. I'm not spending that second round pick on a receiver, so I'm adding Van Jefferson to pair with DJ Moore. I want to add another receiver in the third round, but it's obviously not going to be a guy that's going to be a huge difference maker right away. But Caleb Williams is supposed to bring that to my team, right? He's supposed to be the difference maker for that offense. With that offensive line, it should be good enough at that point to be a competitor. And I'm getting that coach out of here, and I'm getting an offensive-minded coach to pair with Caleb Williams. But yeah, I think we essentially fixed the Bears. Let's move to the Panthers. Let's do this a little different, learn from our mistakes. Let's go like timeline wise, right? We know the coach has already been fired. We don't need to target a specific coach, but what type of coach do you want for this Panthers team?
It's a broken record, but everything is offense from here on out. You actually invested on the defense for a couple years, heavily a couple years ago, and it hasn't worked out. So we're going to bring in an offensive mind. We drafted Bryce Young, number 1 overall, and we can't get out of that right away. And I'm not sure that is necessarily the right move. I think it needs more time to be fleshed out because of how bad things are. So we need an offensive head coach with a system and a plan in place to, again, be quarterback friendly. It's a theme, especially with teams that draft highly that are at the bottom of the barrel of the league talent wise, because that is the quickest way to ruin a career is to not be quarterback friendly, right? But also the quickest way back into contention is to have a quarterback that can just be pointsy and win you some games and get you back into contention. Without that, you have to hit on like 10 or 12, like basically 10 of every 12 pieces and moves that you make, as opposed to if you hit on that quarterback and make that quarterback successful, that really that's the rising tide that raises all boats. So it's absolutely an offensive guy, and owner David Tepper needs to just get out of the freaking way. Just hire a head coach and just go away for 3 years and come back and see what happens. Either 3 years from now, Bryce Young is back on the right track and this is a team that's contending, or it's time to find a new one and go from there. But I don't want to hear from the owner or anyone else for another 36 months after this hire is made.
Okay, so you're going offensive minded. I am actually going to take a different approach. And the reason being is because I think this is one of the most, if not the most difficult situation in football to go be a head coach in. Their roster might be brutal after this offseason, and they lack draft picks. So yes, Bryce Young, developing him to be your franchise quarterback is likely the most important thing for this team. But I think even if you're successful at doing that, the rest of this team is probably 3 years from being good. Yeah, and that's if you draft well, and that's if you retain guys. So when I'm looking at like, how do you keep a team positive, aggressive, fighting? I don't know if you necessarily do that with an offensive minded coach. I think that's when you see these kind of like Antonio Pierce, what he's doing for the Raiders, right? Like you might want a guy like that. Like sometimes you need a rah-rah guy, right? Like you need a Dan Campbell in your locker room to just get guys excited to show up for work every day. And this is one of those situations. I want to build my foundation on that defense. And to be quite honest, if Bryce Young doesn't work out, maybe I'm okay with that because, again, it's going to take a few years to figure this out. Do I really want, once I figure it out, to have to pay my quarterback? Because it might not, like the timing just might not be work out well there. So like I want my defense, I want 3 years from now for my team to be like, hey, I have the best defense in the NFL. And we have a couple guys on offense that are looking good. And maybe Bryce Young works out regardless if we hire the offensive guy or not. So it's from my perspective, it's let's go get Dan Quinn, right? Like, let's go get him out of Dallas, make him the head coach of this team, give him another chance. And he's going to be the coach of my Carolina Panthers.
So you're basically throwing in the towel on Bryce Young, it sounds like.
Not because I think he's bad, but because I think this team can't be good with him.
You just think it's hopeless. You think it's that hopeless.
The situation is that hopeless. I do believe that. And I guess now that we're done with coaching, let me explain why, right? Because next thing is going to be free agency, right? That's kind of how it goes. And you look at this roster, right? And just going down the list of free agents, the offensive side of the ball is decently set for this year, but it's, again, a terrible group of players. But on defense, you have Brian Burns becoming a free agent. Gross Matos is a free agent. You have Frankie Louvu as a free agent. You have J.C. Horn only has 2 years left on his deal. You have to pay him soon. But Jeremy Chin is a free agent. So essentially, like every single good defensive player you have, and defense right now is like your strength, and it's not even a strength at this point. But every good player you have on defense is essentially in their walk year. So what am I doing with that, right? Free agency's first. The first thing I'm doing, right, applying the franchise tag, like you said earlier in my alternate universe, I'm applying that to Brian Burns. I'm going to try to keep him. If somebody wants to make me an offer for like, a first in 2 seconds or a first this year, first next year, I'm going to do that. But even a first round pick isn't doing it for me because I have money to spend. So I have no problem paying him. I have to spend the money anyway. And I don't know if a first round pick, by a team like the Chiefs is really going to be giving me enough ammunition to replace a guy like Burns. And right. And the point of this is to get better. I think Burns leaving, even if it's for a first round pick, doesn't make me better. So first thing I'm doing is I'm applying the franchise tag to Burns.
Do you think you're going to contend for a Super Bowl by the time Burns is 30 years old? He's 25 and a half right now.
Yes.
Going to be 26 next season.
If not, then I failed, right? Like if not, I failed. Anything more than a 3-year plan is failure. So I need by 2026 or 2027, I need to be good enough to like be a true competitor. And that's kind of my plan. Burns will be in that window still.
But you didn't even have a first round pick this year. So that delays your 3-year plan. Like that's one of the most important pieces is that first round pick that you build around, and they don't have that, and that's what makes this so tough.
It is tough.
And so for me, it's like you look at Montez Sweat, right? And I think Montez Sweat is the better player here, but he's 2 years older, and he netted what's essentially going to be a top 40 pick from Washington. So given Burns' age, I do think he gets you a late first and maybe a fourth or something, and some change there. I don't know if he was consistent with his highs, I would sign him, but it's the inconsistency with the player that leads me to just say, if I can get a big return for him, and a big return being a first and maybe another asset or so, I think I take it. But if you want to build around him, then he's going to have to be your defensive leader when you're 30 years old, or when he's 30 years old, essentially. And he's on like the last year. That's optimistic. You're going to get a new quarterback in there to contend for a Super Bowl and build your defense. And that quarterback's going to be ready to contend in 3 years when your quarterback that quarterback's not coming for another 2 at least.
Right. What is I think first thing I need to know is what is the cap space that they have for this team next year?
So it's about 40. Hold on, I looked this up at Spot Rack. Where is it?
Shout out to Spot Rack.
Yes, they're the great they're the greatest. Where the heck did I put it? I believe it's 39 million off the top of my head.
Yeah, so I have money to pay.
Yes, 39 million.
I'm paying Burns. I'm paying Burns.
Oh man.
Definitely paying Burns. I'm keeping him around. I'm giving him like 25 million a year. He's gonna be my foundational edge rusher. And I want him and Derrick Brown to play together, right? Like I want to keep that together. Because one of the things, right? So I was going to talk about this with the Giants. We're not talking about the Giants today, so I was going to save it, but it's important to talk about. When you're building a team, do I have my defensive interior? This situation, yes, I have Derrick Brown. Do I have my edge rusher? Maybe. I want to keep Brian Burns. Do I have a corner, at least one? Yes, I have J.C. Horn, and I want to bring back J.C. Henderson. I want Jeremy Chin to come back at my safety, and then I go offense, right? Do I have the offensive tackle? From my perspective, I don't know if I do, right? Akeem Ekwonu has been very up and down. I know you're really high on him, but like I think to myself, like that might be a need. Receiver, do I have my receiver? No, I don't even have one, right? Like, so that's a huge need. And then it's, do I have my quarterback? I believe I do, right? I have Bryce Young. I'm at least going to give him the opportunity. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, there's a lot of concerns. I don't want to create more concerns and more gaps by selling a guy like Burns and creating another hole for me to fill. That's not going to be easy for me to fill. So I'm keeping Burns.
Okay. All right. Keep going. What else you got in free agency, or are we moving on to the draft?
No, definitely not. I'm doing a lot for this team. So the two, like
40 million doesn't go as far as it used to, by the way. I'm just letting you know.
I understand. I'm going to keep Burns. I'm going to try to keep, like I said, Jeremy Chin. I'm going to kind of prioritize bringing him back. I like the safety, Jamie Robinson, that I drafted, so I'm excited about that. I think my defensive back group at that point is solid. I have Frankie Louvu. I think I could bring him back on a team-friendly deal. No, it's not going to be cheap, but I think I want to bring him back as well. So I'm going to bring him back, pair him with Shaq Thompson. Defensive interior, I'm not going to do anything there. I'm relying on guys like Derrick Brown to kind of hold things up. And I got Brian Burns. Maybe I'm letting Gross Matos walk, even though I want to try to bring him back. But like that might be the most I have to spend. But there are some guys that I would, create cap space with. Adam Thielen's deal is looking, like it looks great right now because he's playing well, but it might not look good a year or two from now. So I'm probably going to try to like spread that money out. I'm going to spread some other guys' money out, like Hayden Hurst, right? If I could get out of that deal, maybe I get out of that deal. And the biggest thing, like I am not leaving without T. Higgins on my team. So T. Higgins has to come back to the Panthers, and I need to pair him with Bryce Young so that Bryce Young has a chance in hell to survive for the next 3 years for my team. So those are the two biggest moves. The offensive line, I'm going to try to make some investments there in the draft, so we'll talk about that when we get to the draft.
So you're going to say, all right, T. Higgins, come back to the Carolinas. Come play with Bryce Young. And then we're just going to go ahead and just do a bunch of moves on defense and just have at it and have fun.
I think if you pay him enough money, right? Like money talks, like DeAndre Hopkins this offseason, right? Like he didn't go to the Titans to win football games. He went there because they paid him to. I'm going to do the same thing for T. Higgins.
All right. Fair enough. We got your PS1 screenshot back on the video feed.
Yep.
Love it. Keep going though. So, okay.
That's it for free agency. So I want to hear what you would do differently.
I'm going the complete opposite direction, basically. In a couple ways. Yes, the offensive focus, but also just saying this thing is going to take more than 3 years. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm almost completely ignoring defense, right? So actually what we did is we tag and trade Brian Burns for a first and a fourth. Again, Montez Sweat netted a high second round pick, his top 40 pick as the main component of that deal. With Burns 2 years younger, I think we can get a little higher return there. Probably a late first from a contending team, but given the way that timing works and such, that likely doesn't happen until after this coming NFL draft. So I'm still going through this exercise without a first round pick and then basically doubling up in 2025 in that NFL draft. So I have gone ahead and weakened my defense, giving away Brian Burns because we like the talent. We need that type of talent, but we're not terribly sold on the consistency there. So we got rid of him. And then for free agency, what we did is we basically said, yeah, look, Derek Brown, we are very sorry, but you're by yourself on that defensive front, right? When it comes to free agency, everything was on offense. I'm going to find out if Bryce Young is the guy or if he's not, because next year I have 2 first-round picks. Either we were so bad that we can go ahead and just draft a quarterback with one of them, or we have ammunition to get one if it's that bad to where we already know after these next 12 months that Bryce Young is not the guy, right? So what we're going to do in free agency is we're going to focus on the interior of the offensive line. We invested a first-round pick in Akeem Ekwonu at tackle, Taylor Moton at the other tackle spot at right tackle. We like him there. That's solid, serviceable. Not a huge weakness there, but the interior is just an absolute disaster. So we're going to go ahead and double up on Nick Allegretti at $6 million per year, and then our main signing there is going to be Robert Hunt. Projected here 4 years, $9 million per. So 4 years, $36 million. Big fan of Robert Hunt. Always have been. So if I can double up at guard and have 2 pieces that I'm okay with and feel decent about, then it's all a matter of, hey, we got to develop our first round pick at tackle in Akeem Ekwonu, and we have something solid there at Taylor Moton. At least our quarterback is not running for his life. We've seen Bryce Young be able to make plays and be a bit of a playmaker if afforded the opportunity when things break down, but you can't have him running for his life as a young player. That's when things just really go off the rails, and that's what can damage a quarterback long term. So we're solidifying everything in front of him in free agency as best we can. So we have an offensive line of Akeem Ekwonu, Nick Allegretti, Bradley Bozeman, Robert Hunt, and Taylor Moton from left to right. And that's where we sit at the end of free agency heading into the draft.
I like that. I love Robert Hunt. And can you see me yet? Probably not.
I was looking at my notes. No, you're just a black square. This is amazing viewing for the YouTubers. This is second week in a row.
Hopefully you're listening.
I have some theories, but we can hear you, so we're just going to keep going. It's like I'm talking to ChatGPT or something.
Dude, it's basically the brains of ChatGPT, right? But Robert Hunt, right? So I great player. I hope the Dolphins don't let him leave because that would be horrible for Tua. But I don't want to spend money with a team this raw on a position that's not extremely valuable. I think you can draft a guy in the draft, and that's what I'm going to kind of talk about next. Is if I am the Carolina Panthers and you did my strategy where all you have is your second and third round picks and the later picks, and then the picks in the future, I'm not going to keep my pick at 2-1. I'm going to trade back, right? I want to accumulate as many picks as I can. I think you can trade back maybe 4 or 5 spots and still kind of get a player that you like. And the guy that I'm going to target, with doing that first is Xavier Worthy from Texas, right? This team needs speed. This offense needs speed. Adam Thielen, right, being your number 1 receiver is scary because he is the opposite of speed, although, again, he's playing really well. So you pair a guy like that, that's a great route runner, with T. Higgins, I talked about, right? So you have now T. Higgins, you have Adam Thielen, and now you have Xavier Worthy that's going to add that speed element. And I think already this looks like a vastly improved situation for Carolina offense. And the defense, again, I brought all of my guys back. So that's, I'm not adding to it. I'm getting that defensive-minded coach to hopefully bring out the best in it. But most of my picks are going to be now on the offensive side of the ball.
Interesting. At 33rd overall, I took Xavier Worthy.
Okay.
Also, yes. Speedy playmaker, big fan of his game. I mean, Mingo's getting crushed right now. Like we all know that Thielen is ancient and speed is not his game, right? Mingo, like we said, he's just getting destroyed right now on the internet, right? They saw that play where he was kind of on the sideline, got a pass thrown to his inside shoulder or hip and jumped out of bounds to contort himself to catch the ball and ensured that his feet landed out of bounds when all he had to do was just stay still and would have caught it's bad. So whether or not you think that Mingo can be something, he absolutely does not bring that element of playmaking and just super quick speedy type separation that someone like Xavier Worthy does. Now, he may be gone by this point too. I mean, I would not at all be surprised if Xavier Worthy's a top 26 pick or so in the draft. So he may be gone. But in both simulations, he was there, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. So yeah, I took Xavier Worthy as well for a lot of the reasons you mentioned and that we're discussing here. Need that playmaking and speed on the outside to help the quarterback. I also then doubled up at pick 65 and took Devontae Walker, the receiver out of North Carolina, in the second round. Prototype size and speed, like over 6'2", can flat out run, can catch the ball downfield. And I'm one who doesn't believe that Mingo is going to be there for the long term. He's not going to be a cornerstone piece or anything like that. So if you can go ahead and say, all right, here are my young cornerstone receivers in Xavier Worthy and Devontae Walker, then great. Then that's what we're going to build around on offense. So as we sit here at the end of day 2, we solidified our offensive line as best we could. Maybe we overpaid a little bit for the guards, but got to remember too, Bryce Young is not the tallest guy, right? That interior is actually more important for someone like Bryce Young than it is for a lot of other quarterbacks. So we wanted to make sure that we shored that up heading into the next season. So we shored that up in free agency, got our 2 wide receivers. Our defense is still an absolute mess, but we also have 2 first-round picks in the coming year.
Okay, I like it. So with the other picks, right? So I said I traded back and got Worthy, which again might not be realistic because he might end up being a first-round pick. But if I'm able to do that, I'm able to maybe pick up an extra 3rd or 4th-round pick. Those next picks are targeting the offensive interior of that line. There's a couple guys. Again, I haven't dug too deep into the film of this guard class, but there's a Christian Haynes from Connecticut at guard and Christian Mahogany from Boston College that PFF is rating very highly. I think those are 2 guys that, again, you can probably get in the 3rd round. I now have 2 third-round picks, so I'm going to take one of those guys and I'm going to start to build that interior of that offensive line back up. Maybe I even kind of take the Packers approach where I'm going to take one guy in the 3rd round and then I'm going to take another one in the 5th round, and you're twice as likely to hit, right? If you double up. So that's kind of the approach they take. And I do like it. I think it's a good approach, especially for a team like the Panthers, whose offensive interior needs some help. So yeah, that's kind of the way I'm going. I think, if I walk away, right? So I'm walking away, I have a new defensive minded coach, that's going to help bring that defense back to what it should be. I have Brian Burns, Derek Brown back, Frankie Louvu's back. I retained Jeremy Chin as well. I'm paying these guys. So that's really where my money in free agency is going, besides the one addition, which is T. Higgins on offense. So now the receivers for Bryce Young are T. Higgins, Adam Thielen, Xavier Worthy, and you got the other guy that you mentioned, Jonathan Mingo, as your 4, which is where he probably needs to be. And then I'm sitting pretty happy just adding some kind of scrappy interior offensive linemen later on in the draft and just hoping for the best.
Yeah, hope for the best is a good way to put it. I mean, it's a long-term build. It's very bad. And I think what's interesting is it's probably not even the worst one. When you said we're going to talk about the Giants at another point in time, and that could be even more painful to try to work through. Either way you slice it, right? We basically went about this 2 completely different ways. Interested to hear what people think about it, which one they prefer. But regardless, it is not a quick build. It's not a 2-year build. It's a long-term build here to get Carolina back to contention status. The only thing that may make it a little easier too, as well, is that their division is not that great.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this is something to talk about. And it's something that I think is super important, right? I was talking about all the important positions that I would make sure I have to have that foundation of a team. Considering the Panthers did not have a number 1 receiver, the offensive tackles aren't sure things. Even if they drafted a guy highly, doesn't mean it's a sure thing. So you don't have the number 1 receiver. You're not sure about your tackle. Your edge rusher is about to be a free agent, right? And then your corner, you feel good about corner. So 3 of the 4 important positions outside of quarterback are not sure things. In that situation, I never trade multiple first-round picks to get a quarterback, right? Like, in my mind, that's a team that's the prime example of when not to do that. I am not against drafting or trading picks to draft a quarterback. I don't necessarily think that's the wrong move, because you look at the 49ers, and even though it didn't work out for them drafting Trey Lance, like, the team was good enough and they had all of the pieces where you insert the quarterback in it and it makes sense, right? Because you could essentially say they traded all those picks and they came away with Brock Purdy, right? And it's kind of the same result as what they were looking for. It just wasn't the guy they targeted. But the team was in a situation where that didn't end up being a bad thing, right? They could survive that. A team like the Panthers doing that is completely different. And I'm going to talk about that as we go through some of these other teams, right? Like the Bears are in a position where they can draft the quarterback. They have enough draft picks where it doesn't matter if they miss on the quarterback because they could always get another one. But also they don't have to trade up to get the quarterback, right? Like they are staying where they are and they're drafting the guy. You look at what the Chargers did a few years ago to draft Justin Herbert, right? They didn't panic. They didn't press the panic button and trade up to go get him. They just sat there and got him, and it didn't ruin their team. But a team like the Panthers going and doing that could ruin this franchise. And that's something that I fear for, like you talked about, you teased a little bit, the Giants, right? If the Giants were one of those teams that says, we have to go get our guy no matter what, and they trade up from, say, 5 or 4 to number 1, they trade multiple years of first-round draft picks, I don't think that's a team in a position where if it doesn't work out, it's going to be okay, right? If it doesn't work out for the Giants, it's going to be bad. And I think we're kind of looking at the Panthers as like a current day example of what will happen to the future Giants if they go that route.
Yeah, and I think you went about this the right way, because I think the easy thing to do is to sit there and go, oh man, they traded up and went and got Bryce Young instead of CJ Stroud, and in hindsight, blah, blah, blah. And I know people are going to retort when I say, if CJ Stroud was in this exact situation, you might not look at it either. They're going to say, well, it's the Texans. They didn't have a great situation either. No, and you in particular were at the forefront of this too. They got Tank Dell, who's emerged and really has made a big difference there too. But also, we talked about this. Their offensive line was making strides and getting better leading into this season. So it was a bit better than the Panther situation overall too. But the point being is that they were not in a position to make a move like that. That was not the time to put their chips on the table for anybody, really.
What is the difference in that offensive line, right? You hit it on the head, right? You have Laramie Tunsil. He is a cornerstone left tackle. You have Titus Howard, who is reasonable. You trade for Shaq Mason, who is a veteran guard. You drafted Kenyon Green to be another guard for you, a solid player. Like this team, you have the pieces on offensive line already to go draft your quarterback. The situations are not the same. People saying that CJ Stroud going to Carolina would be fine, that's nonsense, right? Like these offensive lines are nowhere close to the same. And I think that it's unfortunate that the Carolina Panthers did this, because I like Bryce Young. I like CJ Stroud more, but I like Bryce Young enough to say that if he was in a situation, like if you reversed those roles, right? If you put Bryce Young's on the Texans, I think he's, maybe he's not doing what CJ Stroud's doing, but he's a good quarterback, and that team is still doing good things because of what they did on the offensive line and the fact that they went and drafted a guy that CJ Stroud was comfortable with, like Tank Dell.
Yeah, exactly. He wouldn't be pushing the ball downfield as well as CJ Stroud is. I mean, Stroud is just phenomenal at that. And the fit there is working out great. But yes, he would absolutely be much better than he is now. And we could be singing a totally different tune about him if the roles were reversed. And that's why this stuff is so important when it comes to team building. It's not so binary or as simple as, well, you just pick the wrong guy. There's so much more that goes into it than that, where you could pick the right guy and have the wrong situation and it becomes a bust, quote unquote, when it runs much deeper than the player. So I think, we're on the same page. That was a really bad toe stub, and toe stub is putting it lightly, by the Panthers, during the draft last year. It really set them back.
Right. What's the whole point of playing All-22? So you can be a GM, right? This is why you do this. Mm-hmm. It's exactly why you do this. But that's it. That's what we got for today. We're going to go back and forth between kind of talking about some of these prospects, looking at, your team getting ready for the playoffs. Maybe we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. And then, we need to talk about what these teams need to do for their team building so that they can be contenders in the next few years, and that we can prove that we know what we're talking about when we're building a team. And that's why we play All-22. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at All22_PFF, and leave us a review wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts. And thanks again for tuning in. And Ray, I'm saluting again. You can't see me.
There you go. ChatGPT salute, baby.